Welcome to Unapologetically Yours, a podcast where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationships and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world where we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Unapologetically Yours. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I am so happy to be sitting here today live in person with the profound, delightful, inspirational Lola Wright.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Lola has just the most incredible background, and we came into each other's lives, multiple paths intersecting all at once about a year ago. So Lola is an entrepreneur. She is an inspirational speaker. She is a thought leader. She is a coach. You are so many things. I don't want to put you into one box, but mostly I think that where you have inspired me the most is that there's so many, but the deep thought that you put into how we as people can show up in the world and taking agency over our lives by reframing, by being intentional, by letting go of ego. And you formerly were the leader of one of the largest spiritual communities in the city of Chicago, the Bodhi Center. And I'd just love to hear a little bit about your journey from spiritual leader to thought leader, coach, entrepreneur, and how that has shaped you.
Yeah. I can make it all make sense. So I was raised by two incredibly entrepreneurial people. So my dad still at 80 is working in his business. He does executive search for senior level executives, primarily in manufacturing, though not exclusively. And my mom is a professional fundraiser and has raised tons of money for hospice. So I watched them the entirety of my life understand the value of relationships and the potency of one's mind and the ability to create the results that you desire when you focus and channel your energy. Both as an entrepreneur and as a fundraiser, you have to understand your agency, your capacity, your creativity, your ability to influence. And so I don't think I actually understood that that was so much the water I was swimming in until I met my husband, who was raised on an organic farm in Ohio. Like, we could not have been raised more differently. And he was like, oh no, all those social agreements that seem very normal to you are not what I was raised with.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so interesting. And we've been a gift to each other in creating more balance for both of us. But I have a lot of appreciation for my dad in particular as an entrepreneur who understood the importance of keeping his mind right. You know, when you are selling services, which he essentially was, and you have it all on the line, you know, like if you don't sell, you don't eat, you know, and he had a pretty big life he was supporting. And as a result, he just really was so intentional around his mind, around the environment that he found himself in, the conversations he subscribed to. He has an incredible positivity bias, which can be problematic at sometimes, but has really helped him. And it was very, very useful for me. It has been very useful for me. So I had a really strong model of an entrepreneur. I got pregnant when I was 18. And the way I was raised, that was not the predictable future. So like private school, country clubs, the whole bit, that was not what my parents had anticipated for my future.
That was not the path they had in mind.
No. And I just know that like we all have these journeys in life that are unique to us, that do not always make sense, but are in service of our evolution, our awakening, our awareness, our growth. So that led me down many winding roads. I spent many years in banking, begrudgingly. I mean, I was in banking for so many years as a function of necessity. I had an aunt who worked in banking. I needed a job. By the age of 20, I had 2 little kids. I was pretty much a single mom. I was in a relationship that was very dysfunctional, riddled with addiction and violence. And I was basically taking care of these kids on my
Oh
own.
my God.
And when I got pregnant, my dad basically said, well, you can have an abortion and retain all financial security, or you can have this child and lose everything. It's totally up to you. And I can appreciate now that he was using the little bit of leverage that he thought he had. I chose to have my daughter. That was just what felt like the right and authentic choice for me. And it meant that I was like quite literally on my own. And I had not been raised to be particularly resourceful. So being on my own at 18, it was a big leap. I worked in banking for many years. I was like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I was supposed to be like a rock star, singing on a stage, traveling the world. And now I'm in banking. And
It's like one of those, right? But if I know you, I'm guessing that even though you hated it, you showed up with excellence.
yeah, I got the Bank of America Spirit Award actually in 2000.
How did I know this?
I think it was like 2006 or 7. I got the Bank of America Spirit Award. I created the Chicago chapter of the Hispanic Organization for Leadership Advancement. I was like, I'm here, so we may as well make it work.
Make the best of it.
Yeah.
I love how you have a tendency to do that.
Yeah. And what I can appreciate now, having been the CEO of a nonprofit, having now being the CEO of a landscape design and build company, founding many different, efforts and that sort of thing, is thank God I had those years in banking. Like, it was an apprenticeship. A lot of times we find ourselves in positions and places and moments in life that in the moment do not make sense. And like, I'm a pretty expressive human. So when it's not making sense, most people know this is not making sense. Why is this happening? And everything in my life leading up to this now moment, when I look back, makes perfect sense.
Isn't it wild? It's like the manuscript. We don't know all of those moving parts. And like, just a quick note to the people out there who are finding themselves working that second job and are doing the things that make you feel like this is not my path. Or even when you're like, I'm too good for this. And is the best thing that you can do is show up with excellence, because that shines through and people will see that. And that's where the opportunities come from. When someone sees how you're managing customer service as a barista, and then someone watching can say, you know what? You need to come work for me in this situation. So having a stinky attitude about stuff is really just does yourself a disservice. And if it's really a desperate situation you can't be in, then get the fuck out.
As I was driving here today, I was thinking basically an ethos for our business. And one of the things I was thinking about as I was dreaming was, work is inspiring. Work is purposeful. Work is contributory. I think a lot of people don't relate to work that way. And, I frequently quote Eckhart Tolle. He once wrote, there will come a time where the word work no longer exists because all we will experience is play. That's what I want for myself. And it's what I want for every human being. And by the way, that doesn't mean that I'm going to like what I'm doing within my work all the time. There are plenty of things that I have to do inside of my responsibilities that I don't love. But the net of it, the global picture, am I lit up by what I'm doing? And I will tell you, as I have a team of 18 people at a variety of different pay scales, at a variety of different education levels, backgrounds, etc. In my experience, there's not a correlation between pay grade and purpose. There's not a correlation between how dignified someone's job is, I have that in air quotes, and their aliveness. It's a choice. And I work with some of the most extraordinary men in the landscape design, build, and maintain field, who I am profoundly inspired by every day because of the choice to be grateful, alive, a contribution, intentional. And it's really interesting to be a witness to some of these men, in this case, who are in the field doing pretty hard labor, and their disposition as compared to some of the people that I work with in the office who seemingly have it easier, more comfortable, etc., and cannot access appreciation for what they have. I mean, I could go on and on and on about that topic,
the thing
but
that
it's
comes
really
to
a
mind too is
choice.
it's a choice.
Yeah.
It is a choice about from alignment to an everyday. We have agency in how we want to show up in the world. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves
Totally
of that, but having the practices to come back and be like, okay, so I can either show up in low vibration, which impacts everyone,
totally,
or show up and do my best. I was an episode that's about to come out as this top 10 things I've learned along my 10-year Yak the X in its 10th year of business. And I had a group of people who just like kind of got in this habit, 2019, 2020, who would just like G chat to each other all day long, like just bashing whoever they didn't like and, you know, all that stuff.
This was at your company.
At my company. And it's one of those things. It's like, okay, so you can be someone who continues to pour nastiness into the well, but make no mistake that everyone's drinking from that well, including yourself. So when you say something negative, when you're contributing negativity, it comes back.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the misnomer in like the realm of personal development or self-awareness or transformation is that you cannot also be candid. You cannot also challenge people. And I just think nothing could be further from the truth. Like to be a really powerful, transformational presence within a family system, within an organization, within a community is to be someone who is willing and has developed themselves to say the thing that needs to be said when it needs to be said. So it's not that I'm suggesting, it's not that I hear you suggesting that we need to be like Pollyanna all the time. And that's very different from bringing like a really polluting energy to a space.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So I know that we kind of jumped ahead to where you are CEO of this landscape design install company, 18 people. That in itself is huge. But along the way, when you were in banking between there, you developed some of the most incredible, I think that your foundation of knowledge and awareness around transformation and spirituality and personal development is really unlike many people that I've ever met. So how did you get into that world from banking?
When I found myself as a young mother really brought to my knees, I understood that life was feeling more difficult than I believe it was intended to feel. Like, I'm like, this can't be it. Like, I cannot believe that we would be in this human experience to just endlessly suffer and struggle, you know? And so I started to get really curious. I'm a voracious reader. I happen to come from a family that is deeply curious. My grandparents were Rumi meditators. My grandfather studied with Thich Nhat Hanh in like the 80s. They lived on sacred land as part of a preservation effort outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. My grandfather healed his body of inoperable prostate cancer, and he's been written up in case studies for longevity with this particular kind of prostate cancer. So, I mean, I definitely was swimming in water.
Yeah.
Where there was already a context or a paradigm of transformation and healing. And then when it came to the moment that I was in with myself, where I'm like, life is feeling really hard. I feel like I'm on the struggle bus endlessly. And I just can't believe it's meant to be this way. I started taking a lot of classes. I started reading a lot of books. I met a man named Michael Beckwith when I was 20 years old. And I will never forget meeting him. It would have been 1999 or 2000. I think it was the year 2000. And I heard him speak for the first time. I had won a membership into this weekend retreat thing. I mean, it's like such a wild story I could tell you about, but I'm here. I'm like 20 years old. I won this like weekend retreat series. It's the year 2000. It's Marianne Williamson, who sort of a complicated character. I'm happy to talk about her later date, but brilliant in many ways. Wayne Dyer, Michael Beckwith. I mean, the list just went on and on and on of really brilliant people. And I heard him speak and I just started weeping. And it really felt like, whoa, this man is like speaking to my soul.
My God.
And in that moment, I really woke up to the idea that I'm on the planet at this time in the evolution of humanity to make a contribution and with a unique purpose. And that it was my responsibility over the course of my life to come to learn what that contribution and that purpose is to be. Your purpose, your contribution is not a job title. People get this confused very frequently. It's how I can go from banking to being the CEO and spiritual director of an extraordinary spiritual community that impacted tens of thousands of people around the world, to now being the CEO of Nathan Wright Landscape Design and have it all make sense, because wherever I go, I can be me. And the purpose of me is to say the thing that most people are unwilling to say and to call people forward into a bigger idea of who they're here to be on the planet. So I started taking classes. All of a sudden, my life started to transform.
Not intimidating at all.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, the thing is, I was on my own. So it was like I went from boarding school to a welfare line. And I had to figure out a way to make this work. Like I had to crack the code on being human because I'm like, I have to feed these kids. I have to live a life. I have to and then you put purpose in the mix. It's like, you got to figure, there are laws to the universe that are now substantiated by both science. I sort of live at the intersection of science, religion, and philosophy. I love that science can now substantiate what mystical traditions have been saying for thousands of years, but I had to make my life work. My life was not working. And I had to figure out, how can I come to understand that I have the creative power to produce results that work for me and my kids and my life. So, my absolute favorite quote in all of humanity probably comes from Bob Marley. And it originated from a really incredible thought leader named Marcus Garvey. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Everybody knows that lyric. Everybody loves that song. You do not meet someone who's like, I don't like Redemption Song. Like, everybody loves that song.
Right. And most people can play it on the guitar too.
Yeah, exactly. But to really get that as a code, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Really what that means is human beings are constantly being seduced by the world around them into an agreement of limitation. But when you actually get the infinite capacity that lives where you are, and you can emancipate yourself from being enslaved to a lie about who you are, anything is possible. So as a young woman who was on welfare, who was racking up debt like very, very swiftly and had 2 little kids that I was responsible for caring for, I came to understand that if I can get, Michael Beckwith would say, have dominion over your awareness and you will have dominion over your destiny. So if you can have dominion over your awareness, where you place your attention, you'll be able to create the future that you desire. I believe that on an individual level, on a micro level. I believe that on a collective level, on a macro level. A lot of suffering that we experience as human beings individually and as a nation, as a world, is inside of outsourcing our creative capacity, our agency, our power, and really believing that we are at the effect of circumstances and conditions.
Yeah.
Now, that is not to say that you have not had things happen to you that are not profoundly challenging, deeply problematic, and that we would not want on any person. I was in a very violent relationship with my children's father. I would not want that for anyone. And that does not define the capacity that exists in me to create a new reality. And that is what I want for human beings.
I love that you're bringing attention to this, because it is one of those things where I even catch myself, the way that I was raised was to have full accountability for my actions. So if I came home and it's like my teacher was mean, people were like, tell me about that. So I had to position my life and my thinking around where I show up in the world. Like yesterday, for example, I dropped off a client at the airport and then I stopped at the O'Hare Oasis to get gas. I had a speaking engagement in an hour and locked my keys in the car.
No.
Click, damn. And this is obviously not a violent relationship, but in the sense of I could have gone down an absolute spiral of, and on top of it, I had these like giant feather earrings on. I was wearing a jumpsuit that the hook and eye closure kept popping out. So like my boobs keep popping out. I've got stilettos on and I'm standing in the hot sun being like, can someone help me? People are waving me away like they think I'm like asking for money. And I was like, oh my God. But like I could have gone into a shame spiral against myself, gone into a shame spiral around, any number of things. Or why did this happen to me? I'm going to be late. I'm going to do this. And I did none of it because it doesn't serve. All that would do is impact the people around me, how I treated the attendants when I was buying water, how I tipped the guy who did help. Like all of that mindset work. And that goes to every level of his life happening to me or for me. And what can you learn from those experiences? And you happen to have so much depth and capacity that the experiences that you've had, like especially foundational as a 20-year-old single mother of two in an abusive relationship when your world is completely turned on end, your depth and capacity and ability to hold that and stepped into a space of awareness, purpose, taking agency over your life. Like that's credit to you. Made it way.
I'm grateful for those experiences because I have navigated things that I would not want for another human being. Very rarely do I meet someone who it's just very easy for me to be confronted with the limitations of someone's life and not see what's possible for them. And I think we have a responsibility to one another to do that. We are so seduced into seeing one another and holding the limitations of that person versus holding what's possible. Now, I've also made the mistake, especially in business, where I can fall in love with people's potential.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And I will hire inside of potential and then be like, I see what's possible for you. And then it's like, yes, but we're in reality. And it really doesn't matter what I can see as possible for you at some point. If you don't see what's possible for you, it's never going to move.
Yeah.
So I've gotten much more sober in constructing teams and, realizing the capacity of someone, the limitations of someone, just because the potential of someone is really up to them. But I do think as a general statement, like how we walk on the planet, how we move in the world, we owe it to ourselves and one another to see the good, to hold the truth, to call forward what's possible and not just look at the blemish. We get so fixated on people's blemishes. So yeah, I think that, a lot of grace is needed in the human experience right now.
Yeah, that's so true. And so one of the things that I know you and I have talked about before is how people create their own reality using stories and belief systems that aren't actually true. And those stories can completely derail relationships, can hold people back from their purpose. So I'm curious in your experience about how you navigate, because you do coaching work, one-on-one work, you've been a spiritual leader. How do you help people to shed the ego part of their brain and the stories that we want to tell for survival, maybe, and to start living in the present, basing life on truth? And this is so relevant right now in our political climate as we navigate personal relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step for human beings is the ability to witness oneself. So many human beings are in the delusion of the personality, in the delusion of one's ego,
Of their own ego.
Their own ego. Yeah. So it's like the ego is a necessary aspect of your human identity. It serves you in a million ways. It keeps you safe in many ways. So I am not of the opinion that like what we should be striving for is like ego death.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, okay. I mean, I just think that's so obtuse and so like, how about we just become aware of when the ego is at play? When you become aware and you can create a little space between what we might call your essence and your ego, you actually can choose. So the work that I do, I always bring my personal life into the work that I do because it's the greatest petri dish that I have. And I find a previous generation of like transformational leaders, coaches, speakers, there was an idea that like you have to always present as very together. You wouldn't want to like air your dirty laundry because it would sort of question your credibility. There is, I'm an ordained minister and there is a best practice, like don't process from the pulpit. And so the idea is like, work it out first before you start teaching and talking about it. Sure. Right. So like, I'm a big believer in that. And I find that most of the people I work with, whether it's individually or in groups, really appreciate me being like, so here's what I'm dealing with. Here's how I'm navigating it. So the way I will make sense of this in my life currently, I resigned from Bodhi Center in January of 2020. My last day was March 13th of 2020. It also happened to be the day I flew my kids home from New York City where they were in school and the world began to shut down. When I picked March 13th, 2020, in January of 2020, I had a very clear rollout of how my brand strategy was going to go, how my consulting practice was going to roll out, and everything stopped. Everything went in a completely different direction. And I basically spent the last 4 years making sense of that. My life today is not what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I have that in air quotes, right? Like this life that I'm living today, my assistant who's worked with me for nearly a decade, for the first 2 years of me leading Nathan Wright Landscape Design, which was originally founded by my husband, a brilliant landscape architect, my assistant was like nearly in tears regularly because she was used to seeing me on stage and beautiful, costuming and this powerful voice and presence. And now I'm like literally digging in the dirt because at that point we were in such a labor crisis in this country because of COVID and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I went from being this thought leader, speaker, personality to literally a container designer, which nobody wants me designing their containers in front of their house, but that's where we were. And she was just like, this isn't supposed to be happening. And I'm like, I know. And here we are, So for me, I have to keep letting go of how I think it's supposed to unfold and trust that something greater is happening here, that life has a plan for me, and that I am here to be open, curious, available. So I have trapped myself many times in life. I met my husband 6 weeks later. We were married and had bought a house together. He was basically
I love this story. I just love this story.
Yeah, I mean, he was living like a Buddhist monk and had inherited some money from his grandmother and lived so modestly that figured out he could meditate 12 hours a day, not work, and go to grad school. I was a single mom corporate soldier, always like rubbing two pennies together. We could not have been more different. We had this very mystical meeting. It's an incredible story for another day. And
I love a good love story.
Yeah. Nearly immediately after we got together, it was like a dark night of the soul. It was like, what the hell? Like, this was not a good idea. Now I'm married. Now I'm stuck. Oh my gosh. Thank God I was stuck. Thank God I was trapped. For this personality, being trapped was actually really good because I am a runner and my tendency is like, I don't need this in my life. I'm out of here. And a mortgage and a marriage had me sit long enough to work it out. Now we've been married 17 years and we do drive each other crazy, and we adore each other.
But you have some really great practices to maintain that.
Yeah.
Affection. Like you sit down
in
the morning
every day. Yeah. Every day we sit together in the morning. Every day.
Set intentions. And, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this morning he was like, want to do the daily reader? And I'm like, not really. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I just want to be with you. And so we sat, and it's like, it's usually 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, but it's a practice of getting present. And so I say that to say I have trapped myself many times. I am currently trapped. So what my current entrapment looks like is, why am I the CEO of this landscape design and build company? Like, I don't want to do this. This is not what I'm here on the planet for. Now, I also have private coaching and consulting clients and that sort of thing, but I'm like, I'm Lola Wright. I'm supposed to be like on a stage. Like, what is going on here? And yet this is where I am. And I can resist it. It's the ego that's resisting it, right?
But like, if you think about your manuscript 10 years from now, this is like another cycle. Like you're back in the
Totally.
bank. And look what happened when you were
100%.
from the bank
That's right.
to now.
That's exactly
Like
right.
that is really cool and inspiring. I feel like, damn, I got a front row seat to what this brilliant woman does next.
Yeah, well, and it's actually like there are so many gifts that have come from it.
Yeah.
Like to have a payroll, like, wow, like I have grown this company like 300% in the last 3 years because of my involvement. And, the business was ripe to grow and all that kind of thing. The purpose of Nathan Wright Landscape Design is to build trusted relationships. It's nothing to do with landscape design build, though we're like really plant experts and design experts and that sort of thing. But the stage is wherever I am. And the impact that I can make in relationship with human beings is wherever I am. So I'm just in a learning right now. I'm in my own program. I'm in my own development. I've worked with the same guide and coach for over 15 years. And she frequently reminds me of a Buddhist principle, which is decorate your prison. This idea that like you are in the prison that you've determined that you are in. So if I have determined that being inside of this, landscape design, build and maintain business feels like an entrapment or imprisonment. And I always dramatize things because it's like helps us bring a little levity to it. You may as well decorate it, Lola. Make it beautiful. Stop resisting it. So human beings find themselves trapped in places all the time, whether it's in a marriage that you're deeply disconnected from, whether you're in a job that you really don't love, whether you're in a body that you're, arguing with all the time. We trap ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
And, for me, I just have to make peace when I'm in those moments. I have to make peace within myself. You can't actually transform something from resistance. You have to actually transform yourself. And the paradox is, as you make peace with it, things actually can move, they can shift, they can change.
So, what does resistance look like for someone who is maybe just doesn't have experience with examining those feelings in their body? What does resistance look like?
Yeah. Irritability,
Mhm.
agitation, reactivity, oversensitive, pain in your physical body, resentment, unforgiveness. If you tune into your body, there are probably all kinds of indicators if you're really paying attention, because we are so addicted to quick solutions. We always want like a pill or a practitioner to make something go away quickly. But really the opportunity is to get curious, like, what's going on in my body? Why is my body responding this way? When my grandfather was diagnosed with prostate cancer, he did not follow the typical protocol. He actually got really, really curious. What is this tumor the manifestation of? And he was reminded of a memory from when he was 4 years old, when his 2-year-old sister fell into the creek of a rural area and he watched her drown. He was in charge of her at a family picnic. The uncle was supposed to be watching them too. They walked away. He was 4 years old. They crossed a county road. They went down to a little creek. She fell in. At 4 years old, he walked back to the family gathering and said Anne fell in to the creek. They never talked about it again. They went to look for her. They couldn't find her. Never again was he talked to about it. He ended up becoming an extraordinarily successful chemical executive, CEO of a company, had 9 kids, big Irish Catholic family, and basically just suppressed that memory for his entire life until it manifested as a 3.5-foot tumor that was throughout his body. And through the process of understanding what he had been resisting, avoiding, denying for the entirety of his life, and how it had basically constructed his whole identity. Like, he became this very charismatic, accomplished, successful man, all in an effort to avoid the heartbreak and the pain that never got processed when he was 4 years old. And my mom is named Anne, his oldest child. She's the oldest of 9 kids that were born in 11 years. And many years later, when she was an adult, he said, I never could get close to you because you were my sister's name and it was just too painful. And, it's like all these, if we don't deal with our stuff, it has a generational impact.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you are dealing with something in your life right now and it's causing havoc, even if it seems subtle, we have a responsibility to one another to actually deal with our messes so that we can be a contribution on the planet. And the work impacts generations. So the work I do today on myself, with myself, is a gift to my children, to my future grandchildren, to, you know what I mean? Like, that's our responsibility.
Yeah. That's so, you see how unprocessed pain shows up on people's faces and in their ability to live their purpose. And I love that you demonstrate resistance can look like irritability, frustration. I think to add to that, I would say toxicity, the words that you use to talk about other people, the stories that you believe. And so as we look at ourselves, and this is a podcast about taking agency over one's own life, but we also have a responsibility to, as we show up for each other, to be authentic, to not create trauma between one another by inserting our own experiences into other people. And I think that can look like storytelling, that can look like, interpreting things with our own unconscious bias, not giving people grace to say, one example could be like, Lola, you were rude to me. What? I didn't even know that you were there because I had just gotten a phone call from my uncle that he was dealing with this and I was in my own world. So as a supply, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about how we show up with each other.
Yeah. I think that I do my very best, and it's totally flawed and imperfect on a very regular basis, to come to understand why people are as they are. So my 15-year-old daughter is on this super competitive volleyball team that travels all over the country, and the predictable
it is very
future.
fun to watch.
Oh my gosh, I'm
your
obsessed.
Experience with this.
I love it.
And by the way, how you've decorated your prison.
Oh my gosh, I totally.
You have decorated the shit out of the volleyball prison.
I got there and I'm like, whoa, this is not my world. These are not my people. Like,
this is
all
the commitment.
Of a sudden,
I'm traveling.
Yeah, I am way deep down this rabbit hole, and we're in windowless boxes all over the country with crappy concession food and
all day long.
A culture that drinks way more. I'm not a big drinker, but this volleyball world is this is a big drinking culture. So totally decorated my prison. And when I got over my judgments of the environment, which are so automatic, we prefer the way that we are, generally speaking. So when we go into to environments that are not like us, almost automatically our judgments come online. And we start assessing, and it's just a survival strategy that we do in the background, unconsciously, automatically, nearly all the time. Once I got over that, I actually could get curious about the humanity that existed among the parents that I was on this team with. And there are parents on this team whom, if you look at our stats, we should not like each other. Our worldviews are very different. Our politics are very different. The way our family systems are organized, our cultural agreements within our family systems are very different. We should not like each other. And everything in today's media context would say, you are opposing. That's a choice, though. If I can actually get curious around, I wonder why they are as they are, makes perfect sense then. So if we can pause all our judgments and actually get curious, again, that doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. That doesn't mean that you don't say, this does not work for me. I don't want to exist this way. I don't want to do this dance with you. And still, like, how can we be for one another versus so against one another all the time?
We're recording this episode
55 days before the United States presidential election.
What
That's
a
today
time
is.
to be alive.
Yeah.
And it's never been more polarizing. I think that social media, of course, plays a role and yard signs. So you know where people stand. And if you didn't know that, what could we learn about each other?
Human beings are amazing. Like, that's what I've loved about this volleyball experience. I'm like, and even the team that we have at Nathan Wright Landscape Design, it's like, these are people whose paths likely I would not cross with, and vice versa. But if you actually sit down and take time to get to know one another, I mean, I was like at a volleyball tournament on a Saturday morning. It's 9:30 in the morning. All the parents are like at the bar at the sports complex drinking Bloody Marys. I'm like, I would die if that was me right now, because we are at the beginning. We're here for like 10 hours. And, this one woman started telling me about her life, and, she and her husband were high school sweethearts, and, they had 3 kids, but she always felt compelled to adopt, and like, all this. She took me down these different paths of her life. And I literally, at the bar at 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday, I just started weeping. And she was like, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm just really moved by who you are and the life that you have created. And, she talked
By the way,
about,
I think that happened the first time we had lunch. I'm just sitting there crying as you told me your story about being a mother and what you created and your marriage and all of that. Like,
when we get present with one another, there is not a human being that I've slowed down long enough to get to know that I'm not like, wow, you are amazing. Like, that is true of every human being you meet if you actually slow down long enough and get curious about them. But we're moving so swiftly, and we oftentimes have like tunnel vision, and we sort of can relate to one another as like a liability and in our way. And I just don't think that's it. I have been known, I think it was like 2 years ago, I went to get our first hot chocolate of the season, and we're like in the Starbucks drive-thru on our way to some sporting event. And I said, I want it this way, and, like whipped cream and all the things. And I get the hot chocolate, and it's like, it's not at all what I had asked for. And I was like pretty rude about it. I mean, I was like, really, like, I had this whole magical moment that I was creating for myself with this first hot chocolate of the season. And it was all fucked up, Yeah. And I wasn't like a nightmare, but I was like not my most joyful, gracious self. And we leave, we go to the game, and I'm like, I'm now so attuned when I'm that way that I'm like, that just now I'm like, I don't like that. That's who I was. That's not who I'm committed to being, et cetera, et cetera. Like a week or two later, I went back to that drive-thru, and it happened to be the same girl who was in the drive-thru. And I was like, hey, I was here a couple of weeks ago. I was not great with you. I ordered a hot chocolate. It wasn't the way I had intended. And I just wasn't very friendly about it. And I just want to apologize for that interaction. She's like, oh, I don't even remember. And I'm like, great. I just want you to know, like, inside of my own personal integrity, like, that doesn't work for me to move on the planet that way. And I'm committed to cleaning that up. And she was like, okay. I mean, I think it was just like, great.
Thanks. But that radical responsibility
it's
for your own actions and how you show up.
That's right.
That's a big deal.
When your kids see you be that way, when your team see you be that way, it creates new worlds, new paradigms, So I think a lot of times leaders don't take responsibility for the collateral damage that they can create. And I am like pretty rigorous at taking responsibility for that. Like, what I will not commit to is that I'm going to be perfect. Rest assured, I'm going to screw up on a fairly regular basis. And I don't say that to let myself off the hook. I say that to manage expectations.
Well, and you're fucking human.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But exactly.
But is your expectation that everyone else show up and be perfect?
Yeah. Well, so what I'm also realizing is my standards, like what I want to create in terms of who I work with, are getting incredibly clear. Like there are things that used to work for me or that I would tolerate that I'm not interested in tolerating anymore. And that's okay. It's my world. Like it's your world. You get to create the life that you want, that you desire. And that I don't say that to discard people, but I just am with age. I'm so grateful. I'm getting increasingly discerning around what works for me and what doesn't work for me. When you get clear around what works for you and what doesn't work for you, you actually are more available to get more of what you want. Most human beings, and women in particular, are terrible at getting clear around what they really want because we've been conditioned not to.
Well, and not just that, we have no fucking space. Like you took full agency over that moment in time when you are a single mother with two little kids, working a job that maybe wasn't what you had pictured of your life. None of that was what you pictured in your life. And you started to find the nuggets that you can carry with you and to start to create that space. That was an intentional decision and probably made possible to you by the work that your parents did and your grandfather did. And like you're saying, now your kids will have even more of that because of the space that you're creating for them. But we have a choice, and we have to, particularly as women, wearing so many hats, make that space intentionally.
You have to.
Don't just sit and accept the frustration, the resistance, because so many of us are walking around pissed off, burnt out, not experiencing the pleasure of life. And it all starts with creating a little distance to listen and tuning in. Then it becomes attunement. So you can say, this is for me. This is not for me. So then using your voice to say yes or no to the experiences. And then gradually, little by little, I know that you didn't become the leader of Bodhi the second you walked out of the bank, but you created more space to imagine the possibilities of what was next. And then the universe brings you things that you can react to and create your own future.
Well, and I kept practicing, even though, when I became the spiritual director at Bodhi Center, it's not because I had ascended. It was because I was willing to practice. When I became the CEO of Nathan Wright Landscape Design, it's not because all of a sudden I myself was a great landscape designer. No, it was just like, okay, well, there's a void. Somebody's got to fill it. And I'm willing to put myself out on the skinny branches of life, So it's like,
oh God, could that be a t-shirt, please?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm willing to put myself on the skinny branches of life.
It's not comfortable.
That's it. No, none of this is comfortable. But what comes from that, that's the magic. The purpose.
And nobody's going to give you permission. If you want something, go get it. Because nobody's going to throw you a pep rally or a parade. If you get acknowledgement, that's like a bonus, but don't expect it. I mean, like I have 4 kids. I have 2 daughters. I have 2 sons. I feel really like it is my responsibility to be pretty vocal about the social agreements that exist in our family system that are archaic. And we have like a very progressive family. So it's like, but it's still there.
Tell me about those, like the women clearing the table.
It's more like, so we have our house cleaned every other week. And there's like always the organizing and cleaning that needs to happen before that happens so that it's like an effective exercise. And I'm like, by the way, I spent many, many years not being able to experience that support. Like I know how to clean a house, you know what I mean? So I'm very, very grateful that I am in a position at this stage of my life where I can get support in that way. But for some reason, that exercise is like me running around like a crazy person, doing all the work to prepare for the house to be cleaned. And like, my husband, whom I love and adore, is sort of like, do. And the kids are sort of like, do. And I totally lost it like a couple weeks ago. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This happens every 2 weeks. And the fact that I have to be like the dictator to get everybody to do the things that need to happen before this exercise, which by the way is a complete privilege that we even have someone who can help us clean our house, is completely inside of like an archaic agreement. Like, why is the preparation of a home my responsibility? And frequently when my husband and I get into these sort of like tug of wars around this, he's like, well, I think you're just like literally better at these things. I'm like, no, sir, I am not better at these things. I have had to do these things for so long that I have a competency in them. But it is not like, now it is true that women have developed evolutionarily to have like diffuse awareness, and like we could go into all of the science behind that. But much of this is a function of social conditioning.
Absolutely.
And so if I said to my daughter as I drove her to school that day, like, yeah, I get that it's probably not that fun to hear me like huffing and puffing before your school day about what everybody else isn't doing. But the alternative is I just be quiet and I suck it up and I do it, and nobody gets the impact. And I don't want that for you when you grow up and are in a relationship. So part of what I'm modeling is articulating what doesn't work about this while it's happening. And it's uncomfortable, and pain pushes. Michael Beckwith would say, pain pushes until vision pulls. So most human beings change because of discomfort. Most human beings do not change because like of some wild inspiration. So I'm intentionally creating pain in my family system. So hopefully we can produce a new result. Because I don't know why anybody would want to hear me huffing and puffing every other Wednesday morning before the school day starts. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's like, transformation, evolution, awareness, growth, these days, especially with Instagram, it's like everybody thinks it's like some inspirational, like, light falling out of the sky on a mountaintop, Lululemon pants, like whatever. It's not that. It's like in your house in the morning when all the shit is falling apart, right. Like, are you going to practice?
Right.
So I practice every single day. It is the greatest devotion of my life. I regularly fall short, and I do my very best to clean things up when I do.
Well, I have to tell you that knowing you over the last year has made a profound impact on my life. And so as you are, let's say, I don't want to say looking for the next path, but I want to say that maybe maybe you're not in the spot that you necessarily anticipated as you get clarity about the road ahead. What you said earlier about your stage is where you are.
That's right.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. When you speak, people listen. You have a powerful presence. You have a way of articulating agreements, vocalizing things that need to be changed, and providing thought-provoking tidbits that actually can inspire someone to change incrementally and start to create that space so they can receive.
Yeah.
And it's a gift. It's a true gift.
Thank you.
So I'm really, really, really grateful to have you here and to have you in my life to learn from, and really. And I will tell you one other thing. I think it was like January last year, like you released your Spotify list. I know music is very important to you. It's very important to me. And it was like your top song that you've listened to in 2023. And it was Light of the Clear Blue Morning. That song has gotten me through the last year of my life.
So good.
I like walk around the town just singing that song. So, it's like ways big and small. We can impact people.
Totally.
And we never know exactly what it's going to be because, to your point, we don't get feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hungry for feedback. I'm like, please give me feedback. Now, not all feedback is made equal because it assumes that someone has done their own self-awareness, evolutionary inquiry. But the universe is giving us feedback. Life, the world is giving us feedback all the time. All you have to do is pay attention. You don't actually have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the most prestigious personal development course. You just have to pay attention. You can get feedback from a gas station attendant if you're available to it.
And create the space.
Yeah.
Stop, create the space.
Yeah.
Be intentional.
Yeah.
Decorate your prison.
That's right.
Show up. Like key takeaways from here, our discussion. It's like, show up, be excellent to yourself.
Yes.
and be excellent to other people.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done when you take a second to put aside all of the stories,
Yeah.
all of the beliefs, and realize that you are human and you're deserving of greatness and
That's
the life
right.
that you desire.
That's
and you
right.
look at the next person and say, you are great.
Yeah.
You're worthy of the life you desire. It's
Most
really
human
changes
beings,
everything.
yeah, and most human beings don't hear that enough. Like most human beings have not been told that. So just to say that to someone, like you're extraordinary. Like in you exists the infinite capacity. Most people have been so criticized for most of their life that it's like living water to remind
like you
someone.
just saying this right now. I'm like, I want to get in your lap. I want you to scratch my head and like, I want to be held.
Yeah.
You know, like just hold me. And so many of us are like that. Like
starving.
Just starving for feedback,
Yeah.
starving for love, starving for a mirror to show
Yeah.
that yes, that feeling that you have inside, that excellence that has been buried.
Yeah.
It's worthy of being seen.
Totally.
And if we start reflecting that back to each other,
yeah,
really, truly.
Yeah.
There's
There's an expression like, may you hold the high watch. Like if I hold the high watch for you, the high idea of who you are here to be, you actually ascend into it. But if I hold a low bar for you, you'll also drop into that. So it's like, I'm going to always hold the high watch for what's possible within this person, within this business, within this country, within this community, within this family system. Like I'm holding the high watch of what's possible, not the low bar.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
How can people work with you, collaborate with you, experience Lola Wright?
Yeah, well, LolaWright.com. Definitely check out my website. Follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn. Lola P. Wright is how you can find me. I work with a very few number of C-suite clients. So I do a very limited number of one-on-one coaching with people. I do some organizational consulting. And periodically, I'll organize a live event. So definitely sign up for my email list. I have stuff coming out later this year. So I love the end of the year. I love the season of appreciation. I love the season of completion. You know, you're thinking about November, December, January. I love the season of creation. So I have some stuff coming up. And if you're on my email list, you'll know about it.
Awesome. I think that we should do another event in January.
Yeah, for sure.
For those of you who don't know, Lola and I collaborated on an event in last January that was all about intentionality, setting intentions for the new year, closing out the previous year, honoring our endings. And during that event, Lola asked everyone to write a letter to themselves, their future selves. And I got mine in the mail right before I moved. So that address that I wasn't sure I would still have. And it was really, really powerful, even 6 months later. So
totally.
Yeah, you're amazing. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. You are amazing. Thank you for creating an outlet for these kinds of conversations to occur.
Before we wrap, Lola, please tell me, what are you doing to show up in the world unapologetically?
Well, it's a funny question. The word unapologetic is literally in my brand guidelines. It's the essence of who I am. It is my own radical commitment to not have my being controlled by external authorities. So, like, what am I doing? I speak my truth. I share my heart. I invite those around me to like rise into who they're here to be. So it's like, I think for me, the question would be like, what am I not doing? Like, where am I not living unapologetically? And like, that would be a good question for me to ask. Where am I not living unapologetically? In other words, where am I living small? Where am I hiding? Where am I holding back? You know, and if I were to answer that question, which is the inverse of what you're asking,
the shadow.
Yeah, I would say I am not taking action on some projects that I know I could be moving forward because I am being overly perfectionistic about them. So, like, that's where I'm not living unapologetically. And so I'm living unapologetically in my parenting. I'm living unapologetically in my marriage. I'm living unapologetically as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur. But when I think about like one of the great gifts that I bring to the planet is convening human beings and creating transformational experiences, I am not living unapologetically there. And some of it is this season may not be for that. And I just always want to challenge myself, like, where am I not living unapologetically?
I love that. And I will say this, that like I fully see you on a stage creating, doing all of the things. And it is important too to recognize that when that moment comes, I have no doubt that you're
Totally.
seizing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just the question of like you're planting all of the
Yeah.
seeds, you're lining up those resources, you're taking the experiences, and then you'll jump. So to give you a little bit of grace.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, like dormancy is a natural part of life.
Yeah.
It's a part of nature to go
Yeah.
dormant, to restore oneself, to reconnect. You know, convening of human beings, I'm in a bit of a dormant season, and I look forward to more unapologetic energy there in 2025.
It will be a gift to us all.
Thank
So
you.
we are on the edge of our seat to see what's next for you. So thank you so much for being here. Very, very grateful.
Yeah, I'm grateful too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Go out, make some mischief in the world. And until then, I'm Ashley, and I'm unapologetically yours.